We Americans often fancy ourselves the captains of our own destiny, unfettered by the gravitational pull of financial reality. Our economy is an engine of dynamism and our entrepreneurial spirit an inexhaustible well. We are the indispensable nation, forging a path through the wilderness of global upheaval. But every so often, a voice of prudence penetrates the bravado, a reminder that our strengths rest on fragile economic foundations that could crumble under the weight of fiscal incontinence. This month, that voice belongs to Gita Gopinath, the International Monetary Fund's first deputy managing director. In an interview with the Financial Times, Gopinath issued a clarion call for the United States to rein in its twin addictions to spending and borrowing that have swelled the national debt to World War II-era heights. With economic growth buoyant, she argued, we have ample ground to tighten our belts through spending cuts and tax increases. Her admonitions arrive at a perilous juncture. The Congressional Budget Office forecasts annual deficits mushrooming to 6.3% of GDP over the next decade, a trajectory that would send the debt/GDP ratio into uncharted realms by 2029. The temptation, as Gopinath notes, is to keep papering over the fiscal cracks with more borrowing. It's the path of least resistance for craven politicians unwilling to ask their constituents to make sacrifices. But it's a Faustian bargain, mortgaging our future prosperity in exchange for short-term gratification. Soaring debt service costs will inevitably crowd out productive public and private investment in the foundations of long-term growth: education, infrastructure, research and development. An overleveraged economy is a brittle one, susceptible to even mild economic shocks that could quickly metastasize into crippling crises. Too much debt also robs a nation of its autonomy, leaving it captive to the whims of global capital markets that could abruptly cut off financing if they lose faith in a country's ability to put its fiscal house in order. The United States has been able to finance its deficits with ease, thanks to the dollar's reserve currency status. But that privilege is not guaranteed in perpetuity if we fail to exercise prudence. Some may object that now is not the time for belt-tightening when growth seems solid. But that misses the point. The reckoning merely becomes more painful the longer we delay course correction. We need a credible, sustainable multi-year plan to restore fiscal sanity, a sort of economic masterpiece theater in 3 acts. Act I would be to let the economy run hot, juicing revenues to reduce the deficit. Act 2 would be to prune back the kudzu of unaffordable spending commitments that have been accumulating for decades, starting with reining in healthcare costs, then moving on to reforming cherished entitlements like Social Security and Medicare. The final act would be to rethink the entire tax code, not only raising rates, especially on the affluent through more progressive income, capital gains, and inheritance taxes, but broadening the base by eliminating distortionary loopholes and deductions. This play would span presidential administrations, requiring buy-in from both parties. Therein lies the rub. Our politics have become so balkanized, our discourse so coarsened, that the very notion of putting aside tribal loyalties for the good of the collective seems quaint, a relic of a bygone era of statesmanship. Instead, we increasingly inhabit our own bubbles, marinating in narratives that rationalize more spending for our favored priorities, whether the progressive vision of an activist government or the conservative dream of tax cuts that will supposedly supercharge growth. The truth is that there are no more blank checks. We have maxed out the national credit card. Without a course correction, the supply of government bonds will keep expanding, forcing up interest rates and crowding out private investment. A debt crisis isn't inevitable, but we're begging for one through complacency. Gopinath echoes similar warnings for advanced economies globally as they grapple with the costs of aging populations. In her estimation, reforms to pensions and healthcare are going to be absolutely critical to maintaining fiscal sustainability. She also cautions that the advent of generative artificial intelligence, while potentially boosting productivity, could amplify the next economic downturn by displacing millions of workers and rattling labor markets. Here too, America's social safety net looks ill-prepared, lacking the support systems like robust unemployment insurance and wage subsidies for displaced workers that exist in other countries. The issues of debt, retirement security, and the societal effects of disruptive technologies may seem discrete, but they are bound by a common thread: the willingness to contemplate and prepare for long-term challenges before they become acute emergencies. Too often, our political system averts its gaze, fixated on short-term partisan battles, while kicking the biggest cans down an increasingly perilous road. The fiscal reckoning may still be over the horizon, but the storm clouds are gathering. Gopinath's clarion call is a reminder that the future is no longer as distant as we imagine. We would be wise to heed it before it's too late.